Hey guys, tonight we're traveling to a place that shouldn't be cold. And yet, somehow, is. Imagine standing beneath a sky blanketed with stars, the Persian desert stretching around you like a sleeping ocean of sand. It's dry, it's vast, and it's definitely supposed to be hot. But as the wind schemes past your robes, you shiver, not from fear, but from the impossible chill that clings to the air. This isn't a ghost story, though a desert night does feel a little haunted. This is about the ancient people of Persia who managed to pull off something we still struggle with today, keeping things cold when everything around them is trying to melt. And you probably won't survive this, at least not with your snack stash intact, because we're diving into how ice was made, stored, and even delivered in one of the hottest places on Earth, thousands of years before electricity was even a glimmer in the gods' eyes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is, always curious where we're all winding down together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across sand that squeaks with each step. By day, it's a scorched nightmare, bright enough to sear your eyelids shut. But at night? The desert breathes. And it breathes cold. The moon hangs low and heavy, casting silver over everything. Ahead, a dome rises like something dropped from a different world, a perfect mud brick mound, pale in the moonlight, with a sharp tip that points like a finger to the stars. It's quiet. Too quiet. Like the air is waiting. This is your first glimpse of a yakshal, a name that sounds like a cough and a blessing at once. It means ice pit, but that's underselling it. Standing before it, you feel the temperature shift. Subtly. Like the dome itself is exhaling coolness. And in a way, it is. Built with a strange mixture of sand, clay, egg whites, goat hair, yes, goat hair, and lime, this towering structure holds secrets within. It looks simple, even boring, but step inside, and you're in a desert refrigerator. Historians marvel at the concept. An ancient Persian structure that could store ice through the blazing summer? Yes. Built without modern insulation? Correct. Functioning on pure physics and clever architecture? Absolutely. Inside, the air grows cooler as you descend. The floor dips lower than ground level, spiraling into a subterranean chamber where darkness hugs the walls and silence is complete. And there it is. Not a block of ice, exactly, but traces. Cold, damp stone. A puddle that lingers long after it should. Proof. Some say stepping into a yakshal for the first time feels like stepping into a temple. A quiet space where survival whispered back at the sun, "Try me." You exhale slowly. You're starting to get it. These weren't just storage units. They were defiance, built brick by brick against the impossible. And tonight, you'll follow their story all the way down, into coolness, into ingenuity, into the hum of a past that figured out how to chill before chill was even cool. The moon still hangs high as you stand before the yakshal, marveling at its strange beauty. In the quiet of night, it looms like a frozen wave, solid and serene. You place your hand on the outer wall, surprisingly cool, even though it's made from little more than mud, straw, and engineering wisdom older than most empires. The outer material is called saruj, a clever blend of clay, sand, lime, ash, goat hair, and sometimes egg whites, depending on whose grandmother's recipe you believe. When dried, it becomes almost waterproof. Not Instagram pool waterproof, but good enough to resist both rain and desert heat. And it helps keep the precious contents inside, ice, snow, sometimes perishables, shielded from the wrath of the sun. You begin to walk around the structure, marveling at its shape. The conical dome isn't just for show. It's a genius design feature. Hot air rises, right? Well, the dome helps funnel heat upward and away from the precious cargo. Meanwhile, deep inside, the Yakshal hides an underground pit, sometimes over 20 feet deep, where temperatures stay consistently low, even during the worst heat waves. Historians love to throw around words like passive cooling and thermal inertia, which sound like names of very sleepy superheroes. But really, it means this: by going down instead of out, and by shaping the building like a soft, sloped chimney, the Persians trapped cold air where they needed it most. You step up to the entrance. It's narrow and low, forcing you to bow slightly, a trick to keep warm air from barging in and ruining everything. As you enter, the temperature drops again. It's not dramatic. But it's undeniable. The kind of cool that sneaks into your bones and says, "Stay a while." And here's the best part: the whole system runs on zero electricity. No wires. No humming compressors. Just physics, patience, and a cultural obsession with not sweating to death. Fringe theories abound, of course. Some locals believe the Yakshals were blessed by Zoroastrian priests, infused with divine chill. Others whisper that certain ice pits would hum softly when filled, like the earth purring. Historians still argue whether these details are fact or folklore, but honestly, standing here, you're inclined to believe both. You descend further. The interior is surprisingly spacious, a cool void under the desert's ribcage. In the old days, this pit would be full of hand-cut ice blocks, layered carefully with straw or burlap. On good years, it could keep supplies frozen well into summer, enough for the wealthy to enjoy chilled sherbets in July, or for hospitals to treat fevers when the sun was at its cruelest. You run your hand along the inner wall. It's rough but cool, like forgotten stone. Every inch speaks of effort: hand-placed bricks, generations of knowledge, countless hours of labor just to keep cold in the middle of a furnace. It makes you think. What kind of people commit to building a refrigerator the size of a barn in a land where water is rare and snow is a miracle? People who understand the value of planning. Of patience. Of long games played against the climate itself. And as you sit in the shadow of that dome, surrounded by silence and potential frostbite, you realize something else: the Yakshal isn't just a building. It's a promise. That with the right mix of mud, sweat, and determination, even a desert can be persuaded to cool down. The next morning creeps across the horizon like warm honey poured too slowly. The desert begins its daily ritual of glowing itself into a furnace, but down here, inside the Yakshal, the air remains steady. Still. Cool. You climb the narrow stone steps that spiral upward and emerge into light that hits your face like a slap made of sun. You shade your eyes and look out across the low, wide basin that surrounds the Yakshal. It's not just a building, it's the heart of a carefully orchestrated operation. Because while the Yakshal stores the ice, it's what lies beneath and around it that makes the whole system work. The real magic, if you can call it that, begins underground. Beneath the earth are long, deep channels called qanats, one of ancient Persia's finest inventions. These aqueducts snake silently beneath the soil, carved with infinite care, carrying water from distant mountains to cities and farms and, of course, ice pits. You crouch beside one of the qanat outlets, where cold water flows lazily into a shallow stone basin. The air around it shimmers, the kind of shimmer that usually means mirage. But this is no illusion. It's refreshingly real. The qanats, dug on gentle slopes, harness gravity to transport water without pumps or pulleys. In the process, they keep it cool, shaded by the earth itself. By the time it reaches the ice-making areas, it's not just usable, it's cold. You peer into one of the trenches near the Yakshal. It's deep, shadowed, a quiet gash in the earth. Workers once descended into these to check for blockages or sediment, armed with nothing more than courage and the occasional date snack. One wrong step and you're stuck between a mudslide and a particularly moody mole god. Still, these channels made life possible. They also made refrigeration possible. In the chillest parts of the night, usually just before dawn, water would be directed into shallow ponds or trays laid out near the yakshal. Not just for storage, but for freezing. You read that right. Freezing. In the middle of the desert. Because the air is dry, and the skies are clear, heat radiates out of the water and into space. That's right, space. Without cloud cover to trap it, the warmth escapes so efficiently that the water can actually dip below freezing, despite the ground temperature being far above zero. Historians still argue whether the technique was discovered accidentally or developed methodically over time. Either way, it worked. Shallow pans filled with water froze overnight, then were carefully chipped and carried, often before sunrise, into the yakshal's belly. You imagine the routine, men in linen robes working by moonlight, their breath fogging in the air as they carry slabs of ice under starry silence. Quiet, careful movements. Straw mats laid down like sleeping bags for the ice. Ladders creaking under weight and anticipation. And all of it, every chipped sliver and perfectly stacked layer, owed its success to what was below. The cannots weren't flashy. They didn't roar like aqueducts or dazzle like fountains. But without them, nothing here would be possible. They were the veins of a civilization obsessed with beating the heat. You walk along the edge of a dried basin, cracked with the sun's signature, and spot tiny tracks. Maybe from birds. Maybe from a fox. Or maybe from someone else who came here to remember what it was like when even the sun bowed to cleverness. And as the air begins to thicken with heat, you duck back into the yakshal, into the shade, and down into the earth. It's cool again. It always is. The temperature drops with each step as you descend again into the yakshal, but this time your eyes are drawn upward, to a structure above that defies every desert instinct. A towering chimney of mud brick and geometry. Narrow slits or windows spiral around the shaft, catching the faintest movements in the air like a lazy cat chasing sunbeams. This isn't just ventilation. This is wind catching, and it's the secret to staying cool when logic, and thermodynamics, says you shouldn't. They're called badgers, or wind towers, and they look like upside-down chimneys mounted atop buildings, catching breezes instead of belching smoke. They don't hum or churn. They listen, and redirect. Here's how it works. The tower has multiple vertical shafts, and when wind hits one of the openings, it gets funneled down into the structure below. If the air inside is warmer, it rises, creating a vacuum that draws in more cool air. It's convection, but in slow motion. In the desert, that means survival. In a yakshal, it means refrigeration on autopilot. You press your hand to the inner wall as a faint current brushes past your face. It's subtle. The kind of breeze you'd miss if you were arguing about taxes. But here, underground, it feels like salvation. The most incredible part? Badgers don't need external wind. Some are built with multiple shafts so that no matter which way the breeze blows, at least one catches it. Others use differences in internal temperature to create airflow without wind at all. Some buildings even paired badgers with cannots, using water at the bottom to cool the incoming air further. It's like combining a fan with a swamp cooler, and somehow doing it without a single moving part. Mainstream historians agree this is one of the earliest examples of architectural climate control. A few fringe theorists go even further, claiming the Persians were experimenting with early forms of air conditioning centuries before the rest of the world caught up. And yes, some locals will still tell you the towers sing on particularly windy nights, humming low notes that keep the sand spirits calm. Is it true? Maybe. You're in no hurry to disprove it. You wander through a neighborhood modeled with badgers on nearly every rooftop. Some are tall and angular. Others are squat and decorative, shaped like tulips or fluted columns. Rich families sometimes turn theirs into status symbols, carving poetry into the vents. Nothing says, "I'm cultured," like a breeze that quotes Rumi on its way in. You pause beneath one, tilting your face upward. The sky is blinding, but a stream of cool air nudges your cheek like a polite but insistent cat. It's the kind of sensation you'd expect in the mountains. Not here. Not under this sun. Still, it works. You visit a small shop that uses a wind catcher to chill dates and pomegranate syrup. The vendor hands you a cup of thick, ruby-colored juice, cool, not icy, but shockingly refreshing. From the tower, he says, tapping the wall. All day, no fire. Children nap nearby, sprawled beneath open shafts. Mothers fan them lazily, more out of habit than need. You realize something profound. This isn't technology as spectacle. It's technology as routine. As instinct. You sit beneath a badger, sipping slowly, watching dust drift through the air. A bird flutters past the opening, wings casting quick shadows on the dome's inside wall. The coolness clings to you, gentle and undemanding. And for a moment, in the middle of a desert, you forget what it means to sweat. The stars return before the heat even finishes leaving. As twilight softens the edges of every brick, you find yourself back near the Yakshal, where the desert night prepares for its strangest trick, manufacturing winter. A row of shallow channels lies carved into the earth. By day, they look unassuming, just dusty gutters that haven't seen a good cleaning in generations. But by night, they become ice factories, activated by starlight and physics. Water flows gently into these shallow basins, just a few centimeters deep. It's perfectly still. No ripples. Just a smooth, glassy sheet under a black sky bursting with stars. You sit cross-legged beside one of the basins, and the air around you is already shifting, cooling with every tick of moonrise. The stone beneath you is cold. Not refrigerator cold, but definitely not sand in your sandals warm either. This is the moment the ice makers wait for. No hammers. No spells. No whispers of abracadabra. Just time and atmosphere doing their delicate duet. Because while the air temperature may hover just above freezing, the water, exposed under a clear sky, begins to radiate its heat directly into space. It's a process called radiative cooling, and it's science in its quietest, most elegant form. Historians agree that the Persians likely understood the result long before they could name the mechanism. But they knew it worked. So every night in late autumn and winter, water would be poured into these basins under carefully monitored conditions. Stillness was key. Even a small gust could ruin a whole night's worth of potential ice. And as the hours passed, a delicate film of ice would form. Thin at first, barely visible unless you bent low and kissed the ground with your gaze. Then thicker. Then solid. By dawn, workers, sometimes entire families, would arrive with baskets and flat shovels, lifting the ice like porcelain, stacking it in carts, and ferrying it carefully down into the Yakshal's depths. Layer by layer, night after night, they built a frozen summer treasure, one chilled sunrise at a time. The job wasn't glamorous. It meant waking when others slept. It meant frostbitten fingers, cracked heels, and the occasional encounter with a stray camel that really didn't like cold water. But the reward? Preserving ice well into July. One fringe account even claims a prince once hosted a summer feast in the dead of the desert heat, serving chilled rosewater and saffron ice slushies to confused foreign dignitaries who suspected sorcery. The only magic? A really well-run free schedule. You reach down and press your finger to one of the newer basins. It's just beginning. A sheen like glass. A whisper of cold. A promise. And you realize, they weren't just making ice. They were saving time. They were bottling winter for when the world forgot what cold felt like. Above, a breeze passes overhead. Not strong. Just enough to kiss your cheek and nudge your thoughts toward slumber. You lie back on a slab of stone warmed by yesterday's sun, now cooling under tonight's stars. And somewhere nearby, beneath the earth, a pit waits, empty for now, but soon to be filled with winter's quiet gift. The world smells like dust and possibility as you wake beneath the fading stars. All around you, the ice has settled in, quietly, invisibly, beneath the night's cloak. A thin, fragile skin has formed across the shallow basins, glinting in the pre-dawn like glass that forgot how to reflect. The workers arrive without ceremony. No trumpets, no sunrise songs, just sleepy feet in sandals and the occasional goat that clearly thinks it should be in charge. You follow a young man named Farid as he unwraps a thick cloth from his shoulders and ties it around his waist. His breath fogs slightly as he kneels beside the first basin. With a practiced hand, he presses a flat, wooden tool under the sheet of ice and lifts it, whole, as though harvesting glass. You flinch as it cracks, but no one else does. Cracking is part of it. They stack the sheets carefully, layer upon layer, adding straw between each one like bedding for a very cold, very picky guest. These people are the ice keepers. The desert's quiet rebels. Part engineer, part janitor, part night owl. They don't just gather ice. They protect it. All season long. You watch Farid load the slabs into a cart pulled by a donkey with an expression that screams, "This again?" They wheel it slowly toward the yakshal, and you follow, trailing behind the cart like some ghost of future refrigeration. Inside the dome, the pit yawns open, ready, waiting. Farid and another man lower themselves in using rope ladders. The space is already cool, and it will only get colder as the stash grows. They place each sheet carefully, adding more straw, more cloth, more insulation. One man pauses and wipes his brow. "For the wedding," he says simply. You raise an eyebrow. He smiles. She wants cold pomegranate juice in June. And there it is again, the why behind all this effort. It's not just science. It's not even survival. It's hope. The idea that months from now, when the air tastes like fire and the ground could fry an egg in its sleep, someone will pull ice from this hole and make something better with it. An elite household might use it for desserts, sorbets made from mashed fruits, honey, and rosewater. Or to chill wine during feasts where peacocks strut between tables and someone's cousin reads too much poetry. Others use it more humbly. To soothe fevers. To preserve milk a few days longer. To offer guests something that proves their host is not just hospitable, but impossibly resourceful. You sit at the edge of the pit, swinging your legs and feeling the cold air climb up toward your feet like it's telling you to respect the ground. One older worker passes you a shallow clay bowl with something soft inside, shaved ice, sweetened with syrup and pistachio dust. "Taste," he says. You do. It's sweet. Floral. Cold in a way that makes your teeth tingle and your spine remember snowfalls you've never seen. And that's the miracle, isn't it? Ice. In a desert. Not just made. Preserved. Protected. Shared. Historians still argue whether Persia's ice harvesting systems were inspired by earlier methods in nearby regions or developed independently. But either way, these weren't flukes. They were deliberate, organized, and sacred in their own way. You glance up. Dawn has arrived. The basins are empty again. Tomorrow night, they'll fill once more. But for now, the pit holds the cold. Quietly. Proudly. And above it, the desert forgets, just for a little while, that it was ever hot at all. You follow the morning hush as it settles over the desert like a silk veil. The carts are gone now, the basin's empty, and the sun climbs steadily toward its throne. But inside the Yakshul, the ice keepers continue their work, cloaked in shadows and determination. They're not royalty. They're not priests. But in their own way, they're just as revered. Because keeping ice in the desert isn't just science, it's reputation. You tag along with Farid again, your unofficial guide to the quietly heroic. He walks with a slight limp, a ladder mishap, he explains, though you suspect it may have involved goats and dignity. Today, he's checking for leaks in the sarouj plaster, patching hairline cracks with a muddy paste that smells faintly of lime and worry. We don't talk during this part, he says, smoothing the mixture into a fissure. It's a listening job. And sure enough, as you hold your breath, you hear it too, a faint, steady drip from somewhere deep inside. The sound of betrayal. Of melt. A tiny hole, barely the width of a finger, has let warmth slip in. But with swift hands and an old trowel, Farid seals it. The Yakshul exhales softly. Crisis averted. You follow him through the rest of his day, up ladders, through tunnels, under vents. He makes minor repairs, shovels straw, tracks the flow of incoming ice. He's not alone, others pass by, trading tools and stories in low voices. One hums a lullaby to himself, oddly beautiful in this echo chamber of clay and cold. They break for lunch beneath a small awning, eating dates and flatbread, sipping water that is, of course, not warm. Someone pours a bit into a clay jug and lowers it into the pit for later. For the afternoon shift, he says with a wink. We bribe ourselves. One worker shows you his journal. It's filled with numbers, sketches, temperature notes written in a script so curly it looks like it's trying to do a dance. He's tracking how long each load of ice lasts. Soon, he says, we'll build one twice as deep. Fringe accounts mention a class of desert engineers called Yakshul Guardians, who were often part of multi-generational families. The knowledge of ice storage was passed down like heirlooms, along with the tools, the ladders, and the extremely specific jokes about slippery stairs. You ask if they ever get bored, doing the same thing night after night. Farid chuckles. Would you ask a tree if it's bored of growing? Point taken. In the afternoon, the heat outside turns the air into soup. But inside, the Yakshul remains cool, the thick walls shrugging off the sun's tantrum. The workers nap in shifts, lying on thin mats beside the pit. One snores like a distant drumbeat. Another dreams with a smile. You sit quietly, back against the wall, trying not to disturb the rhythm. There's a peace here. A discipline. A gentle defiance that comes from knowing something others don't. Because while the world outside bakes and sweats, these people hold winter like a secret. And they guard it well. By twilight, the city stirs again, but this time, it's the elite who stretch and yawn, not from work, but from waiting. Because the real reason ice is so carefully preserved isn't just for medical needs or survival. It's for luxury. And nothing says ancient Persian wealth quite like serving a frozen dessert in the middle of a sandstorm. You find yourself at the edge of a private estate, where the gates swing open just wide enough for curiosity, and a guest list written in poetry. Inside, the gardens are impossibly green, coaxed into bloom by secret canet lines and servants with infinite patience. Torches flicker along gravel paths. The scent of jasmine rides the breeze. And in the center, on a shaded marble patio, sits a long table crowded with nobles, poets, and one extremely fat cat. At the head of the table, a man in silk waves for silence. A servant approaches with a silver tray, and on it, gleaming in the torchlight, is a bowl of faluda. Thin noodles made of starch, frozen with rosewater, lime juice, and a dusting of ground pistachio. It's cold. Frost glitters on the edges. And every guest leans forward like they've never seen such a thing. You try it. It's unreal. Sweet and floral, with a crunch of ice and a bite of citrus. Your tongue thanks you. Your brain whispers, how is this even possible? This wasn't a one-off either. Historical sources describe cold desserts served in the courts of Achaemenid and later Sasanian kings. Some were simple, snow-flavored with fruit syrups. Others? Elaborate creations served in hollowed-out pomegranates or chilled amphorae. The Persians even had cold wine rooms, tucked beneath palaces, where amphorae were stored beside blocks of packed snow. It wasn't just about flavor. It was status. A frosty treat in July meant you had wealth, connections, and very cooperative ice keepers. One fringe tale involves a wedding where the bride refused to appear until a bowl of saffron snow was brought out. No chill, no vows, she allegedly declared. They scrambled. She married. The story became legend. You wander past another group lounging on silk cushions, sipping sherbet made from sour cherries and frozen mint. A musician plucks softly at a setar, and someone recites a line of Hafez that sounds suspiciously like it's about brain freeze. A servant passes by with a jar, condensation slick on the outside. Inside? Cubes of frozen melon. You blink. The luxury is outrageous. The cat blinks too, possibly in judgment. But even here, in the most opulent corner of the desert, you feel the thread connecting all of this to the mud-brick yakshul you slept beside just last night. The ice may travel far. It may be served on silver. But its journey starts in the quiet, careful hands of those who rise before dawn and whisper to straw. You overhear a noblewoman boasting that her family has exclusive snow rights from a particular mountain range. Her companion scoffs. We have 2 pits and a private wind tower. Somewhere, an engineer sighs quietly and invents a new way to prevent envy from warming the walls. You leave before dessert ends, stepping out into the cooler night where the air finally decides to be polite. The stars look the same as they did above the ice pans. And you smile. Because whether you're royalty sipping faluda or a worker hauling slabs down a pit, the chill is the same. Precious. Earned. Shared. The road ahead is lined with hoofprints. Morning creeps over the desert again, painting shadows across the sand. But today, you're not following ice down into pits. You're following it out. Packed tightly into thick cloth bundles, wrapped in layers of straw and animal hide, the ice is leaving the yakshul. And not for a nearby garden party this time. Today, it's heading for the edges of empire. You trail behind a caravan of camels, each one groaning in that musical, judgmental way only camels can. Their backs are loaded with large woven baskets, candy, ice crates, basically, designed to minimize melting during the long journey. The drivers wear light linen, their heads wrapped in loose scarves. One is singing softly to himself, a tune that seems older than the sand. This isn't just delivery. It's logistics. You fall into step beside a man named Haman, who introduces himself as a chill runner. A term that would make a great band name, but here means a person responsible for not letting luxury melt into disappointment. He checks the cargo every half hour, adjusting coverings, flipping bundles, dabbing at moisture with a rag that's more prayer cloth than towel. We're taking this to Shiraz, he tells you. Wedding feast. Summer. Mustn't melt. It's a multi-day trip. The camels pace carefully. Stops are calculated. Some ice is lost, always is, but enough will arrive to justify the effort. And it's not just Shiraz. Some caravans go much farther. Across Persia, to smaller courts and desert outposts where snow is a rumor. Where nobles sip warm drinks with forced smiles, hoping a chill shipment is coming. When it does, celebrations begin. Ice is a gift, a marvel, a reputation booster. You learn that some caravans traveled with small clay jars of rosewater ice, made for preservation. Others carried frozen fruits packed in salt, which acts like a desert cooler. One particularly eccentric scribe wrote about lemon snow globes that arrived in royal banquets and were immediately smashed, to gasps and applause. Fringe records mention competitions among elite households, who could keep ice longest, who could serve the coldest sorbet in August, who could send snow as a diplomatic gesture without turning it into a puddle of embarrassment. Historians still argue about the range of these deliveries. Could they truly travel hundreds of miles with usable ice? Some say yes, especially when using relay systems, cool storage caves, and routes mapped to take advantage of shady canyons. One preserved letter even mentions a snow relay, teams posted every few days to transfer bundles from one group of camels to the next, ensuring the cold never lingered too long under one sun. You sit beside a resting camel, its breath loud and warm, and sip from a skin of water that's somehow still cool. Haman leans over and says, "We don't just move goods. We move seasons." The image stays with you, people carrying winter across a desert on the backs of huffing beasts. As the caravan rolls on, you imagine the moment of arrival. The unveiling. The gasps. The laughter. The smug host. And you think, somewhere, someone will taste something cold and sweet tonight, and have no idea how many miles that miracle traveled to reach their lips. You leave the caravan behind, trailing the dusty wake of icebound camels as they shrink into the shimmering horizon. But the story of cold doesn't end with noble households and poetic desserts. No, now you head to the center of chill authority. To the palace. Specifically, to the heart of royal command, where kings don't just own ice, they wield it like a symbol, a spectacle, and occasionally a dramatic flourish in the middle of an already dramatic empire. You approach Persepolis, stone steps rising like frozen ripples from the sand, columns standing as if they never heard of gravity. The wind carries the scent of history, and something faintly minty. Inside the palace, things are quieter than you'd expect. Rooms are massive but still, the kind of stillness that makes you whisper instinctively. Your sandals click softly on polished stone as you follow a servant down a side corridor lined with carved reliefs of lions, bearded kings, and gifts being presented by people who look like they haven't blinked since Cyrus was in short pants. Eventually, you arrive in a cool, shaded chamber where a team of attendants huddle around a long stone trough. Inside the trough? Snow. Not ice slabs. Not melting lumps. Snow. Powdery, white, slightly clumpy, and entirely out of place. "It was delivered last night," whispers a boy who might be 12 or 40. "For the king's tea." You blink. The king's tea. You're shown into a grander room, where a gold basin steams slightly beside a small mound of snow. An official adds crushed herbs to the snow, then pours hot water over it in slow, circular motions. "So it cools, evenly," he says. One sip. One quiet nod. The king approves. Royal use of snow wasn't just personal. It was ceremonial. Used in offerings. In public displays. In rituals designed to impress both gods and guests. At coronations, it might have cooled the hands of priests. At funerals, it soothed the brows of mourners. At feasts, it became centerpiece, symbol, even status enhancer. One inscription describes a Sasanian ruler who summoned winter from the mountain and bound it in a basin, which sounds like a poetic way of saying he had excellent logistics. You wander deeper into the royal wing, where servants polish crystal cups and rewrap bundles of cloth marked with snow symbols, delicate designs stitched in silver thread. Some rooms have miniature yakshals carved from alabaster, used as incense holders or symbolic gifts to important visitors. Fringe records describe snow rooms in larger palaces. Small chambers filled with packed ice and scented straw, where the royal family could retreat from heat or headaches or unwanted poetry recitals. One guard tells you of a rumored punishment, being sent to the ice pit without shoes. You glance at his boots. He shrugs. Better than being sent to the poetry pit. Historians still debate whether these snow rituals were strictly practical or partly spiritual. In Zoroastrianism, cold is sometimes associated with purity, reflection, or renewal. So maybe it wasn't just about refreshing the royal palate. Maybe it was also about reminding the king that even in power, he was part of a larger, cooler cosmos. You step back into the corridor and gaze out over the courtyard where torchlight flickers against stone. It's warm again, the evening preparing to soften the edges of power. But somewhere in this palace, in a room lined with straw and salt and silence, a slab of mountain snow waits for its next grand appearance. And you realize. To the king, snow isn't rare. The road curves away from palaces and poets now, leading you into the weave and warp of everyday life. You follow a dusty alley shaded by low arches, the scent of clay and cumin thick in the afternoon air. Children run past with olive-sticky fingers. A merchant fans himself with a broken plate. A dog sleeps under a stall like it's given up on everything. But then, you feel it, a cool draft brushing against your ankles. A sudden drop in temperature, subtle but undeniable. You turn a corner and see it, another wind catcher, this one squatting atop a simple, sun-bleached building. Below it, an arched doorway opens into a home that hums with quiet relief. You've entered one of Persia's cool houses, residences designed not just to survive the desert, but to soothe it. Inside, the walls are thick, so thick you suspect they might be plotting something. Light filters through high-set windows, reflecting off smooth plaster. The temperature drops instantly as you cross the threshold. In the center is a shallow pool of water, part decoration, part humidity control. A jug of water rests nearby, beaded with condensation. Someone has left a tray of dates beside it. You nibble one. It's cold. Not icy, not frozen, but cool. Which, in this climate, feels borderline magical. You're greeted by a woman named Soraya, who leads you through the house with the casual pride of someone who knows her home is a physics experiment disguised as architecture. She shows you the badger shaft first. The breeze channels through narrow brick corridors, slips past ceramic cones, and trickles down into every room like an invisible butler trained in air conditioning. Then the basement, a space called the sardab, or cold room. Deeper than the rest of the house, it's used for storing food, cooling bodies, and sometimes just hiding from the heat with a good scroll. Soraya gestures to a clay jug. Put your hand inside. You do. It's cool, like morning. Even entire neighborhoods in cities like Yazd and Kashan were designed with these principles, aligning buildings to maximize shade, connecting homes with underground water channels, and topping many roofs with badgers to keep air flowing. Mainstream scholars agree these were among the most sophisticated examples of passive cooling in pre-modern urban planning. But locals would just call it good design. Fringe tales claim that certain houses were built with whisper bricks, hollow clay blocks that made faint humming sounds when wind passed through. The house sings, some said. Others claim it was just really bored airflow. Soraya laughs at this. My house doesn't sing. It just sighs a lot. Like me. In the evening, neighbors gather in the courtyard. Children play near the water basin. Someone plays a flute badly but enthusiastically. People sip cold drinks. One man tells a story about a cousin who built a sardab so deep, it connected to the underworld. He kept finding skeletons, he says. Everyone nods. No one believes him. They're still jealous. And as you recline on a worn cushion, feeling the cool breeze tug gently at your sleeves, you realize this: the ice pits, the wind catchers, the trickling canets, they weren't just marvels of engineering. They were generosity, embedded in brick and straw. A promise that everyone, not just the royals and merchants, could have a moment of comfort. A breath of winter in the middle of a fire-colored land. You rise early again, though here, time moves more like syrup than clockwork, and find yourself invited to a construction site. Not for a palace. Not for a wind tower. But for a yakshal in the making. A low hum of voices, the rhythmic slap of mud against molds, and the occasional curse about a misplaced goat fills the morning air. It's not glamorous, but it's foundational, literally. The workers begin with a pit, carefully measured and lined with packed earth. From here, the structure will grow upward, like a dome-shaped seed pushing out of the desert skin. The mud they use is thick, heavy, and strangely fragrant. This is saruj, the ancient supermaterial you first touched days ago. It's a miracle mixture: clay, lime, ash, sand, sometimes goat hair for binding, and occasionally egg whites, an ingredient so mysterious that even the workers pause to say, "We don't ask. We just mix." One man pats a fresh layer smooth and says, "You could build a house from it. Or patch a roof. Or trap a demon." You nod like that makes sense. Saruj is applied in layers, smoothed until the surface becomes almost waxy. Once dry, it repels water, resists heat, and endures abuse better than most court poets. It's the reason ancient yakshals still stand in parts of Iran today, silent, sunburned, but stubbornly intact. Historians agree that saruj, though humble in ingredients, represents one of the most effective early composite materials for insulation. It was cheaper than marble, more resilient than wood, and less prone to catching fire than, say, your average drapery-filled palace. You watch as the workers form the lower curve of the dome using a wooden scaffold shaped like half an orange. They smear, smooth, and chant, not for magic, just for rhythm. One woman, supervising with crossed arms, tells you that the shape is everything. Curves hold better. The wind moves around them. Heat forgets how to settle. She gestures to the horizon. Like dunes. Or camels. Every few hours, the outer layer is left to dry. Then comes another. Layer upon layer, the yakshal thickens until it becomes more fortress than fridge. You're invited to help, of course. Your handful of saruj slides more than sticks. A child watching you bursts into laughter. You mix like a tourist, she says. You accept your fate. Nearby, bricks are drying in the sun, some for the exterior, others for the internal staircase. All are handmade, sun-baked, and oddly beautiful in their imperfection. Tiny fingerprints remain visible in the edges. This yakshal will remember who built it. You sit for a moment, sipping warm tea under a cloth canopy. One elder recounts how, as a boy, he fell asleep inside a half-built dome and dreamed of snow. When he woke, a thin frost had formed on his tunic. Coincidence, he says. Or a blessing. Fringe beliefs about yakshals suggest that their rounded shape amplifies earth energy or channels ancient desert spirits that disapprove of sweating. Scholars roll their eyes, but no one builds them square. As the sun reaches its zenith, the workers pause, letting the materials rest. The structure now resembles a low hill, nothing impressive yet. But you can already feel the promise inside it. Of stored winters. Of future pomegranates chilled just so. You step back, brush serruge from your palms, and realize that you've touched a process older than cities. Not just construction. Preservation. A way of saying, heat may rule, but not without a fight. And the fight, it turns out, is made of mud, straw, and really good geometry. You rest in the shadow of the half-built dome, watching as the workers scatter for lunch, their laughter rising like smoke from clay pots. But as the breeze cools your forehead, your mind drifts further, beyond this village, beyond Persia, across deserts and seas, to other places where people fought the heat before the age of Freon and humming compressor units. Because Persia wasn't alone in this icy ambition. Your first mental stop is ancient Egypt, where nobles stored snow and ice brought from the mountains, delivered by runners moving faster than most hieroglyphs could keep up. The Egyptians used deep pits, shaded and layered with straw, not so different from the Yakshal system. But the scale and permanence of Persian designs were unmatched. Then to India, where the Mughal emperors had entire ice houses, baraf khanas, constructed for summer. They used mountain snow and elaborate chain deliveries through the Himalayas. It was regal, but inefficient. Fragile. Dependent on cooler neighbors. In ancient China, early records describe ice harvesting from rivers during winter, then storing it in insulated pits known as ice wells. During the Tang dynasty, an official ice bureau oversaw collection and distribution. Bureaucratic frost, deliciously organized. Over in Greece, Hippocrates recommended cold drinks for fevers. Wealthy Romans went a step further, hauling snow from the Alps and storing it in shaded caves. Nero famously sent slaves up mountains just to collect snow for his honeyed drinks. Excess? Always. Still, no one built structures quite like the Persians. Others transported cold. Persia engineered it. Mainstream historians widely acknowledge Persian yakshals and wind towers as the most advanced examples of ancient passive cooling. While other civilizations gathered and stored, Persia harnessed architecture to create coolness, not just preserve it. One fringe theory even posits that yakshals influenced later designs across North Africa and the Mediterranean. You can still see mud brick domes in Morocco and wind towers in Egypt that whisper ancient Persian design principles. But while the forms echo, the spirit remains rooted in Persia, a culture that didn't just wait for winter but built it. You open a notebook, don't ask where it came from, and begin sketching what you've seen. The yakshal, its curved walls catching moonlight. The badger slicing air like a quiet sword. The cannet winding invisibly under a city's ribs. Every part was connected. You imagine a visitor from the future, wide-eyed, clutching an overheating gadget, stumbling into ancient Persia and whispering, how is it cold in here? The locals would shrug. We planned ahead. You sip more tea. It's gone lukewarm. You pretend it isn't. And as the workers return to their scaffolding, their laughter and banter mixing with the clink of tools, you feel something settle in you. Awe, yes. But also a quiet certainty, refrigeration isn't modern. It's ancient. It's elegant. And sometimes, it's made from nothing more than mud, time, and a refusal to sweat. The afternoon sky is molten copper now, heavy with heat that sticks to your skin and thoughts. You duck into the shade of a small fig tree and rest against its trunk, brain full of domes, wind tunnels, and snowy rituals. But as cicadas buzz and shadows stretch, another thought curls into your mind like cool mist: did they invent the fridge? The idea is irresistible. You've wandered through mud-brick marvels, traced cannets with your toes, and shivered in ice pits where the sun never dares to intrude. You've watched wind guided like a houseguest and heat pushed away with nothing more than shape and silence. So yes, the question is fair, were the Persians the first to really get it? Mainstream scholars won't commit too quickly. They say phrases like proto-refrigeration or pre-modern cooling systems, with the caution of someone handling a very old, very cold egg. But they do agree, Persia's systems weren't just impressive, they were unmatched in scale, longevity, and integration. Fridges today? They're mechanical. Loud. Plugged in. They hum and wheeze and shiver. But the Persian yakshal? It was passive. Sustainable. Earth-cooled, wind-breathed, sun-defiant. And it was beautiful, often ornamented, painted, whispered about like a wise elder. You flip open your notebook again, this time jotting down a side-by-side. Modern fridge needs electricity, coils, coolants, and regular guilt from environmental impact. Yakshal needs mud, wind, planning, and a really committed goat hair supplier. Still, it's hard to draw a straight line. Refrigeration, like most good ideas, arrived in fragments. But Persia's fragment? It was foundational. 1,000 years before compressors and fans, they created cool spaces where ice could thrive and sweat dared not enter. Fringe theorists, of course, go wild here. Some claim lost scrolls detailed even more complex temperature control systems. Multi-chamber yakshals, mobile badgers, or clay pots so finely tuned they could chill wine just by being spun in shade. No one's found these yet. But in ruins like Yazd and Kerman, people are still discovering buried channels and unmarked domes that hint, maybe we've underestimated them. You stroll now through one such ruin. It's quiet. A single column of crumbling clay, half swallowed by sand. No signs. No ropes. Just a whisper of geometry. But as you step inside the shaded shell, the temperature drops. Not dramatically. But enough. A local guide, appearing from nowhere like all the best guides do, nods as you exhale in surprise. They didn't invent cold, he says. They just invited it to stay. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe invention isn't about building something new. Maybe it's about recognizing what already exists, and finding a way to protect it. You close your notebook, tuck it into your bag, and stand still for a moment longer. Not as a historian. Not as a tourist. But as someone who understands, now, what it means to live in a place where even heat has a rival. You return to where it all began, the old yakshal, now quiet in the moonlight, its dome blending into the desert like a resting animal. You trace the steps you've taken, your mind a scroll of mud bricks, wind shafts, freezing pans, and frost-bitten figs. Tonight, the stars are especially sharp. The air carries that same impossible chill, not enough for goosebumps, but enough to make you believe, again, that this place holds secrets in its soil. Inside the dome, silence wraps around you like a well-worn cloak. The pit below holds a few remaining sheets of ice, veiled in straw, sweating slowly into memory. It's not a dramatic ending. No grand display. Just cold, surviving. You kneel at the edge, listening. You almost expect the ice to speak. But it doesn't need to. Because its message is written everywhere, in the layered bricks, the angled vents, the quiet confidence of a structure that defied nature just by existing. People still visit these places. Not many. But enough. Some bring offerings, dried fruit, polished stones, folded prayers tucked into the straw. Others come just to feel it, the hush, the breath, the reverent coolness. In some towns, the tradition is reviving. Restorations are underway. Wind catchers are being studied again. Yakshals rebuilt, not for ice, but for inspiration. Schools teach the geometry. Engineers whisper about bioclimatic design like it's a new invention, forgetting Persia did it with goats and gumption. And still, there are elders who remember. Who stand beside cracked domes and say, this once held the winter. Not metaphor. Memory. You climb to the top of the dome and sit beneath the stars, the desert stretching endlessly in every direction. A soft wind brushes your cheek. You let it. In your hand is a shard of straw, plucked from the edge of the pit. Dry. Ordinary. But sacred in its own stubborn way. And in your chest. A quiet pride, not for your discovery, but for having witnessed something so calmly brilliant. Because in this land of sand and sun, the people didn't beg for mercy. They built a freezer. Out of dust. And filled it with dreams. Now, let the story settle like fine dust in evening light. Let the wind soften. Let the dome cool just a little more. You've walked through an empire that chose quiet defiance over brute force, that turned sun and silence into tools, and asked only for a little cold in return. The ice has melted, for now. But its memory stays. In the walls. In the wells. In the way the air still moves with purpose through a 1,000-year-old tunnel. And maybe that's all we need to remember, that comfort, real comfort, doesn't have to be loud. It can be designed into the bones of a building, folded into the breath of a breeze. You close your eyes now, still perched atop the dome. The stars above you blink slowly. The wind around you hums, gentle and old. The desert sleeps. You're not in the past anymore, but the past, for a moment, has curled up beside you and offered you a blanket made of cool stone and slower time. There's no need to rush. No need to ask more questions. Everything important has already been whispered. Let your breath slow. Let your limbs relax. Let your thoughts drift like ice on a quiet pan beneath the stars. You've wandered far. And now, it's time to rest. You are home. You are cool. You are safe. Good night.